Now on both the transform and on the add column tabs in the ribbon, there is a group of buttons called number column or from number here. They contain the same buttons like statistics, standard, scientific, trig, rounding, and information. And so to demonstrate this, if I went to the orders query and I selected the gross column, and let's say we started with rounding, and I'm going to add a column that rounds. If I add a column that rounds up, then all of these figures will be rounded up to the nearest dollar, 69, 17, etc. If I delete that step and say actually grab the gross column, go to rounding and round down, then it will add a column that rounds the gross figure down to the nearest dollar. And I can delete that. And lastly, if I select the gross column and choose rounding and say round, I can then say to exactly how many decimal places. So I might say 1. And if I go OK, it makes a column that has rounded that gross figure, let me just scroll to the right, to 1 decimal place. 68.75 becomes 68.8, which is 1 decimal place. And I can delete that. So that's what the rounding button does. You can add a column that takes a value and rounds it, or you can transform a column and actually round it. Now if I wanted to add a column that looked at the next button, which is information, I could click on gross, go to information and say, look, is the information in this column even? Is the information in this column odd? If I say is odd, then it will give me a column that says is odd, and if the number is odd, it'll say true, 175, and if the number is not odd, like 70, it'll say false, and even does the inverse. Let me delete that. If I choose gross again and go to information, the third option is sign, and so basically it would tell me in this column with the use of a 1 that it's a positive value. A 0 would tell me it was a 0 value, and a negative 1 would tell me it was a negative value. These are all positive values greater than 0, so they're all just going to show 1s. So I'll delete that step, but that's what that information column does. It gives you information about whether the column is even, odd, or positive or negative. Now the next button is the trigonometry button, which won't make a lot of sense unless you're into trigonometry. But if I wanted to add a column that showed me the sine of gross, or the cosine, or the tangent, or the arcsine, arccosine, or arctangent, I would just click the button. And so here's the arctangent of that gross figure. But if you're not into trigonometry, you probably won't use it, so I'm going to delete that. The next button, if I select gross, would be, say, scientific. If I go into scientific, I can ask it to give me an absolute value. So that would work if I had a situation where I had a column of positive and negative numbers and I just wanted to add a column or transform a column to just show me the positive value, not as a negative value. This would be useful if I wanted to show the square root or the cube or to the power of that particular figure. Sorry, square. This is the square root, this is the exponent, and then you've got logarithmic. If I wanted to see the base 10 or the natural logarithm of that value, I could create a column that did so, or I could create a column that gave me a factorial of that particular number. So again, unless you're into these scientific things, you probably won't use them, but that's what they'll do. Standard means that I could add a number to gross, or multiply gross by a number, or subtract or divide, or even give me a percentage of. So let's say I had to add a standard $3.50 fee to all my gross figures. I would simply go add, I'd simply say 3.5. And when I go OK, it'll add a column that adds $3.5, $3.50 to the gross figure. So you can go to standard, you can add a figure, multiply, subtract, divide, etc. And then I'll just delete that. Statistical, I might go to transform here. So if I go to transform and I select gross, statistical will offer to sum the gross figure. So if I sum that, the total gross is that figure there. And you can see up here the M language. And if I delete that and go back to gross and select transform and go back to statistics, I could ask for the smallest, the largest, the median, the average, the standard deviation. I could ask it to count the number of values or count the number of distinct values, none of the duplicates. So that's what statistics does. So that sort of answers what those buttons there do.